Calming down in lockdown, rethinking technologies for a slower pace of life. Hi, my name is Yasamin Asadi, and today I'm presenting with Professor Margot Brereton. We are from Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane, Australia. We began this study looking for an answer for how can technology support social connections for older adults, and what are some new ways to stay connected with others besides messaging applications and phone conversations. However, soon after the study started in February 2020, the COVID-19 virus started to affect many people. When COVID-19 was declared a pandemic by World Health Organization in March 2020, older adults were advised to stay home apart from essential trips, and there were many restrictions put on aged care facilities. As a result, technology use was on the rise, with new technologies being introduced every day, such as Zoom meetings and online grocery shopping. These restrictions also highlighted the need to research how older adults were adjusting their lives to the circumstances of the pandemic, and how and if their technology needs have changed. In addition, we wanted to know how technology could be adjusted to support their needs more. To answer these questions, we conducted 3 rounds of semi-structured interviews with 13 older adults residing in Australia. The questions were centered around 3 general categories of everyday life before and after the pandemic, interactions with technology in daily life, and their relationships and communications with other people. The first round of interviews was conducted between May to June 2020, and at the time, all states in Australia were under a form of lockdown. The focus of this round of interviews was to figure out how the pandemic has affected the older adults' lives, what technologies they use in their daily life before and after the pandemic, and how they engage with them, as well as finding out how they keep connected to their loved ones at a distance. The second round of interviews was conducted in August 2020, where most states in Australia had ended their lockdown. The focus of the second round of interviews was on their experience after a few months of the pandemic, keeping them inside their homes, mainly asking questions such as how the lockdown affected their health, social status, or their technology use. The third round of interviews was conducted in October 2021 with our Melbourne-based participants. Melbourne currently holds the world record for longest days spent in lockdown, and we redefined questions from previous interviews to unpack how our participants' perception of lockdown had changed. After analyzing all the findings with thematic analysis, we had 23 themes and subthemes. The theme of the slowness was generated after the first 3 steps of the analysis process. This led us to examine the literature on slowness and slow technologies.
We now turn to related work. So, studies of lockdown, such as Ogden's UK study in 2021, showed it had affected people's perception of time, with older people tending to experience time passing by more slowly during lockdown. Other studies in different countries, such as Australia, Belgium, or Singapore, also reported similar results about time passing more slowly, being calmer and less busy, even with different cohorts, such as nurses and pregnant women. However, individual experiences and circumstances of lockdown are highly variable, and certainly not everyone experienced or enjoyed slowing down. But our focus turned to understanding this phenomenon of slowness and considering how design can support it. In response to perceptions of a rapid pace of life and constant interruption from technology's notifications, alerts, and alarms, researchers have developed what are called slow technologies, which aim to promote more mindful interactions. These technologies help the user appreciate the joys lost in a fast pace of life. There's been a lot of research about slow technologies, but should we use slow technologies to support a slower pace of life?
During the pandemic, people's attitudes towards the new normal and technologies that supported it had to be reassessed. Our participants explicitly expressed their interest in continuing to live a slower-paced life and wished technology would support that. They found technology very helpful during this time. However, they now wish for less intrusive technology to accompany them in their new chosen pace of life. Based on the findings, we proposed 3 new pathways for slow technology design.
The early stages of lockdown were marvellous because you got to do all the things you've been meaning to do for ages. It encouraged me to go for walks, to do things which I haven't done in 20 to 30 years, and it encouraged me to do some sewing, which has been hovering like a guilty conscience forever.
The first design principle or pathway is the agency pathway. We found that older adults really enjoyed being more in control and able to curate their own activities, adjust their activities, and develop their own routines in their slower pace of life. This points to designing technologies that support this sense of control, whether slowing down is due to choice, external circumstances, or bodily changes. The agency pathway advocates for supporting greater power over one's personal schedule and activities, or enabling a person to adjust a situation to their need. Thus, rather than designers creating technologies to prompt moments of reflection by deciding on the time and format of the engagement, we argue that the notion of reflection in design should also be considered in light of people's circumstances, foregrounding how they would like to take back control of their lives.
One of our participants, who is part of a transport club, mentioned, all the guys, widows or bachelors who live on their own, and I've just rung them off, not to discuss the world or not, just how it's going. A couple of them said, if you're not going to talk about transport, I'm not interested. They call it on-topic and off-topic. I didn't want to talk about off-topic things. That's been a bit of an eye-opener, which leads us to the second pathway, the preferred interaction. Looking at the current forms of communication technologies, our participants expressed insights about the nature of interaction that they desired in their slower lives. We give many examples of how our participants wish to change the current forms of interaction or how they preferred the changes that happened because of COVID-19 restrictions. We really need to design better to support people's preferred interaction. Many people found social media banal, expressing a preference for deeper interaction in smaller social circles. Some did not want to always be accessible. Sometimes the activities that bonded people were simply not replicable by technology that aims to mediate distance. Transport and garden clubs were important to older adults, but without the activity to mediate the social interaction, participation shifted drastically. How to achieve a type of interaction that the users actually enjoy. Overall, the preferred interaction pathway alerts us to understand and design qualities of interaction that suits people's emotional and interactional needs, bearing in mind how accessible they want to be and what formats best matches their life. We argue it is worth exploring how to achieve deeper interactions beyond current forms of social media and video conferencing platforms, possibly involving Internet of Things technologies. Existing platforms have all sorts of joining, participation, and use practices that many people do not like, and they are designed with motives other than those identified by our participants. Lockdown made people curious to seek deeper connections on a more personal level over distance, something more than messaging and video conferencing has to offer.
My garden never looked as good because it's never had as much time devoted to it as at the moment. I'd be getting messages on my phone saying, "Where are you? We've started the Zoom meeting." Then I'm going, "No, there's still a bit of light. I join it at 6 instead of 5. I can still do some gardening. Why would I come in and sit down and chat?" The third proposed principle and design pathway is the adapting to social circumstances and natural rhythms pathway. Slowness is not just about the pace of life. People can always be on the move, but consider their life slow because they're on their own clock. For example, cooking at home can be perceived as slow in contrast to using a food delivery application to access food quickly, often with the attendant irritating complications of registering details and selecting menu items. Slowness can be configured as an assertion of identity and self-determination, rather than a characterization of the speed of activities. For those who embraced slowness, their days were in many ways as dense as ever, but they functioned on their own natural clock, instead of an interplay with other people's schedules. While many participants took the pandemic as an opportunity for self-discovery and self-determination, for some, restricted social activity was despairing. Temporal design calls for considering the social relations in people's lives and how their rhythms intertwine with each other's. Building technology-enabled social connections around hobbies, book clubs, cooking, transport clubs, etc., and rhythms associated with those hobbies might foster less direct and more sustainable social connections than, for example, direct face-to-face Zoom parties. This could reduce the feeling of social isolation and promote the maintenance of hobbies and new social connections even after lockdowns end. We ask how technologies can foster better engagement with natural and biological rhythms. We can certainly change the settings of our digital devices to our needs for connection. However, we argue that designs that do not need altering and that are inspired by somaesthetic interaction design, nature cultures, and decentering the human would suit the slower life chosen by some.
So to sum it all up, in this study, we recognize the design of slow technology to meet older adults' needs during social restrictions imposed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Our ethnographic study of older people residing in Australia and experiencing lockdown revealed that they all lived life at a slower pace, embracing some aspects of slowness and struggling with others. We delivered 3 design pathways from their experience of slowness to inform technology design for slowing down, called the agency pathway, the preferred interaction pathway, and adapting to social circumstances and natural rhythms pathway. These 3 align with principles of a slow design that derive from a design perspective, but offer a distinctly different emphasis. In particular, they address the activities that people preferred and the challenges that they faced when adapting to a slower life. We hope these design pathways will be further investigated in the wider community of older adults affected by the pandemic around the world. Since our participants expressed a slower pace of life is their preference moving forward, that's why we call this paper Calming Down in Lockdown. Thank you.